Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yes, my name is Arrowfire, and welcome back to another episode of All Talk, No Shot, where I am joined by the one, the only Jim Sorenson. Say hello, Jim.
Hello, Jim.
You certainly have done that. It's morning where you are, so I appreciate you coming on at a very early hour for you. So thank you very much for coming and talk with me today.
You're very
Today,
welcome. I'm glad to be here. I love to talk Transformers. It's one of my favorite things. I don't know when the video is going to air, but yesterday they just dropped this phenomenal music video covering, virtually every AV incarnation of the Transformers in a giant mashup. And I don't know, it's just such a fun fandom sometimes. It can be a real joy.
we've had a lot of interesting stuff. Being the 40th year of Transformers, we've had a lot of nice little toys, nice little things to get our teeth into. And yesterday's anime that dropped, well, certainly got attention, shall we say. It really got a lot of people talking.
And
Today,
deservedly so. I mean, it's just super, super high quality, super engaging. But I'm sorry, I'm taken away from where you want to go.
no, it's absolutely fine. What I want to talk about, Jim, is actually what something that you're very good at is, as you've shown, being a regular guest at TFNation, some of the real hard to find stuff that the typical Transformer fan would not come across. You've gone through some draft scripts of the 1986 movie, which you and Kris went through in three parts a couple of years ago, which I was there at TFNation, and that was brilliant to listen to that. But that's really what I wanted to go in because there's a lot of things out there that don't make the public release, and you're very good at tracking it down. So I appreciate that's a bit of a broad brush, but oh, cat's interfered.
Yeah.
but um, how what do you remember then, Jim, for your first kind of deep dive into the hidden stuff and production of Transformers? What did you first come across thinking, oh, I want to look for that? That's not really readily available.
Well, my story in regards to that specifically began when I found a website back in the probably the 90s, late 90s, called Rockman 666. And it had scans of the Japanese laser discs, specifically the Megatron laser disc, which was this sort of the second half of the season one, season two block that had come out in Japan. And it was themed around the Decepticons. And in the liner notes for the laser discs, they had all of these black and white illustrations of turnarounds of all of the Decepticons that showed up in season one and season two. And I didn't really know what they were, but I knew they were really neat. They clearly looked like some kind of production document. So I started doing some homework trying to figure out what they were. And again, this is the 90s, so the information just wasn't as accessible. And I found out that these were the animation models. So when you're doing a cartoon, especially a traditional 2D cartoon, when you want to have a character show up, the first step after you've written them is to have an artist come in and do an illustration of them, and they'll probably get some notes and they'll go back and tweak it. And that is going to be the template so that when you have all the different animators, and you could have dozens or hundreds of different people drawing this same character, they'll all be using the same reference material. So the character is always on model. The character always looks the same in every scene. And if it's an important character, you'll probably get a turnaround. So you'll get the front, the back, the side. Sometimes not so much for Transformers, but for more traditional animation, you might get different expressions, different mood. You might show how they're posing. Because Homer Simpson isn't going to sit in a chair the same way that Bart Simpson is going to sit in a chair. Daffy Duck's facial expressions aren't going to be the same as Bugs Bunny's facial expressions. So you draw all that stuff out and you get that reference and you use that. So that's what I was looking at. And I said, well, these are really, really neat. And I'd like to track them down. And not too long after that, maybe on order of months, a Transformers Bible from Marvel Comics came up for sale. And a production Bible is a document that's used by the people who are creating a show or a comic that will contain the premise of the show, information about the characters, their motivations, their abilities, and the animation models that were created for the cartoon wound up as part of the Marvel production Bible, which makes sense. There was a lot of crossover. Marvel actually had done a lot of the work. Bob Budiansky, who was an editor at Marvel, had come up with most of the characters' names, I think all of their bios. And so he had been working from the toys and from the animation models. So they had all this information. So I wound up buying that on eBay and photocopying it and immediately reselling it because I was much more interested in the information contained than the actual sort of physical object. I don't do a lot of hunting down of physical objects for the sake of owning a physical object. Usually I turn around and sell them. Every once in a while, there's one I'll keep. There's one on the wall behind me, a couple of the hand-drawn Floroderi illustrations of Cybertron that were used for more than meets the eye. And I got that was actually a gift. So I wasn't going to turn around and sell that. But for the most part, I'm more interested in finding and sharing the information than I am in sort of owning an object that's probably going to sit in a closet somewhere. The other nice thing about that, as opposed to a Bible, is a Bible is going to be on a bookshelf at best, or in a closet or garage or storage unit at worst. Whereas the art I can throw up on the wall and appreciate. So I got that, and that became the basis, and that had all the characters, I want to say, from season 1 and season 2. And that became sort of the seed that eventually became the ARC books, which were the first couple of books that I did with Bill Forster. They were character animation model books, and a little, you always look back on your old work and you think, oh, what could I have done different? What could I have done better? I'm glad that I was able to get those models out there. A little primitive now, and sadly, because they're out of print, they tend to go for a lot of money. So I imagine there's completionists out there who've spent a lot of money and then got this relatively bare bones, simple book of animation models that I helped put together. But and that came out in 2007. But I was really proud, and still am, to do that because at the time there wasn't that much reference out there. So if people wanted to draw in the style of the G1 cartoon, they would have had to do elaborate freeze frames, and that was hard to do, especially when there wasn't that much home video available. Rhino had come out with some of them, but it wasn't so easy for people in 2000, 2001, the Dreamwave kind of guys, to get that material in a reliable way. So they tended to use the toys. So if you look at those cartoons, they tend to have a lot of toy details. And I had always really liked the aesthetic of the G1 cartoon. So it was really cool for me to get those out in a much more accessible way. And while they're out of print and expensive now, in 2007, 2008, they were easy to find and cheap. And I did notice a lot of artists, professional artists, fan artists, buying them, using them as reference. And there was a bit of a resurgence of that style. I think I was able to help with that. So that's how I got involved in tracking that down. And I think I said it was only the season 1 and season 2 guys, and we wound up going through season 3. So I had to start sleuthing to try and get these models that I didn't already have. And that involved a journey that ended up in Bob Budiansky's basement on Thanksgiving weekend of probably 2006, where he had all his family over, and I was in the basement with a scanner going through his boxes and scanning them. So it was a wild journey, and some of those skills that I picked up, and those contacts, and I guess the credibility of having some books behind my name, have opened up a lot of doors and made it easier for me to go out and find more. And then sometimes people come to me. Sometimes people say, look what I found. Are you interested? And oftentimes the answer is yes. Let's get this archived. We just recently I worked with a group called the Sunbow Marvel Archives, a guy named Simon Lech in the UK, and he's really passionate about getting all of the Sunbow cartoon documentation that he can find up online, readily accessible. And he's done a really good job. He's helping to host all of the storyboards that we found, scripts. You mentioned the Transformers movie early drafts, of which there are two. Um, that really super early one that we did, the three-part series, and the second draft also by Ron Friedman. The first one was by Ron, and that one is a lot closer to what we finally got, but it still has some pretty significant differences. We found that a lot earlier. That there's a whole story behind that one too. But we're hosting those. We're hosting tons of scripts, tons of storyboards. So it's just neat to be able to find and host that. And we just dropped yesterday the Flint Dilley's season 3 binder, which is full of animation models and bios for some of those characters, some of which haven't been seen before. If you remember the Transformers Universe Profiles book from the 80s that had Bob's extended bios. The stuff on the tech spec was the condensed version, but he wrote page-long versions for almost all the characters from the first 3 years. And those wound up in 4 dedicated issues that went through the most of the season 1 and season 2 characters, and then the extra ones, the ones from season 3 and some of the season 4 characters, some of the 1987 characters, wound up as bonus material in the back of the comic books. But some of them never came out, and like some of the Terracons never had their full bios published. So those are in that document drop. So it's fun that we're still finding and getting permission to share that sort of material.
That's so interesting to hear. I could see you talk on about that because there's so
I mean,
much.
I could go on, but I feel like I've been talking for a while.
No, no, no. I mean, it's. I think there's so much out there that we will not cover all of it today, but I think that is just so interesting. And how you said the dawn of the internet, really home computers as well, really limiting how it was to find this stuff. And thankfully, it's kind of gone into a technological age that you can scan and have a bit of these things shared out. And you more or less talked about going on to what was going to be my next point, was building up a bit of a community and people sort of networking together to say, oh, I found this, or what have you found? And sharing and passing on information to make it more accessible to the general fans and general public.
I will say that with the Transformers fandom in particular, there does seem to be a very strong sense of community, of wanting to share. There's always going to be the people that, find an object, stick it in their vault, and then it's never seen again. But the Transformers fandom seems to have less of that than I've encountered in other fandoms. And it's really refreshing that there is that sense of wanting to share, wanting to collaborate. And Simon and his group, and there's a whole bunch of us that we have a Facebook Messenger group that we go back and forth, and sometimes stuff comes up for auction, and we'll pool money, and it's really very. There's a lot of that, collectively financing things. I mentioned the second draft of the movie script. That was something that the Transformers wiki community sort of found all the Ron Friedman auctions of tons of binders of scripts and character profiles, animation models, that draft of the movie script. And we got a bunch of it and that was something that I was happy to help lead the collective effort. But tons of people chipped in hundreds of dollars for us to bid. And we didn't get everything. We didn't get that first movie draft, but eventually it did show up, which is nice. But we got the second movie draft, and that's where we got a bunch of the scripts for the first 30 episodes or so of the Transformers, and we collectively got that, and then we wound up selling. Again, I'm not interested in owning all those documents, and it wasn't just I'm the one who had them come to their house. I'm the one who scanned them and put them up online, but the objects sort of belong to the community. So we wound up selling them at private auction, and then that money got donated to the Hasbro Children's Hospital in Rhode Island.
Oh,
so it was a very it's such a feel-good story. Like ultimately people chipped in money, people got a bunch of cool stuff. The extra profit. I think they sold for. I think I wound up selling them for more than we paid for them, or pretty close to it. And then all that money goes to charity. I mean, what a cool, what a fun story that was. you know.
Yeah.
And then we got to read about the Anabots and Ultra Magnus getting drawn and quartered. Some of that stuff we hadn't seen. Some of that stuff we had inklings of from early comic adaptations and stuff. It's great to see it.
Yeah, there's things like I've gone on about it, but I'll use it again. That first draft of the '86 movie, so wildly different to what we got in the final cut, which for me, I love because for all of us, we know the '86 movie back and front. So to hear your run through of what could have happened when you find it, you almost can't believe it. You can't believe it's the same movie, same writers, same design. And as you so rightly say, for it to all be a good cause come the end of it, because much often with, I'm again giving a bit of a broad brush statement, but quite often with any collecting of any kind, it's kind of the hunt that you enjoy as much as anything else, finding the next thing. But to then have that added sweetener at the end of it going to a good cause like you've done, which is that's a lovely round off to a very deep story.
And one of the fun things about hunting for me, this kind of material, is when you're after information, stuff that is digital or can be digitized, then it winds up, fitting on a hard drive, fitting on a jump drive or on your phone. So like, my I have physical toys, and I have some that are in boxes in the garage, and honestly, that doesn't feel great. But having so much of what I've done over the years that literally is on my phone or has made it into a book, that is a fun feeling because I can kind of always go back and look at it. I did GI Joe animation model books like I did for the Transformers, and like I said, you always kind of as a creator learn from your past experiences. So the Joe books are a lot more produced. That again, I worked on that with Bill Forster, so there were more design elements to it. We had excerpts from the file cards in it, like their quotes wound up, and it just even though at core it's the same sort of information, it's the animation models, and in some ways there's less because with the Transformer, with Optimus Prime has a robot mode front and a robot mode back and a robot mode side, but he also has a truck mode front and a truck mode side. So every just about every Transformers character has that extra visual element of a vehicle or an animal form. And with the Joes, it's usually front, back, side of a soldier and maybe some guns.
Yeah.
But despite having maybe objectively somewhat less in the way of visual variety of the characters, we had more visual variety of design in the book itself. So, but I have a copies of those books on my phone, and I just every once in a while find myself opening up the PDF and scrolling through it. So sometimes it's because someone has asked a specific question about Lady J and I'm looking for the answer, but sometimes it's just like oh yeah, let me look at Big Boa. What's he look like again? Oh yeah, he's a cool dude.
That's excellent. So you mentioned around obviously to having the stuff on the phone, it's not really having the physical copy, but is there any one thing, Transformers or otherwise, that you or a network of you have tracked down that you kind of hold as a little bit of a holy grail that you think, I really wanted to track that down and this feels big and special and stands out above the rest?
Well, the first draft of the Transformers movie script was something that we knew existed for years, and we're very happy to finally track down from Flint Dille. And I've told this story before, but it was I was in his garage on election day, 2020. Like it's funny how these events coincide with sort of the real world. Thanksgiving weekend. It wasn't the day of Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving weekend at Bob's house, election day at Flint Dille's house. It's funny how you can track those sort of milestones.
So one thing I was going to ask next then is that seeing some of the things that you picked up in the community, or we were chatting before we started recording about your time out in Japan. I don't know if you just want to quickly go over that again and what you were able to obtain when you were out there.
Well, I right out of college, I went to Japan as an English teacher for a couple of years, and this was in the very late '90s. Beast Wars Second and Beast Wars Neo were on the air when I was, and a little bit of Car Robots when I was out there. And it was a fun time. It was fun on a number of levels. It was fun being a teacher. It was fun getting to be like more than a tourist. Getting to actually live and interact with the culture, and that stuff was really amazing. But in terms of Transformers, I was able to track down all of the Japanese, just about all of the Japanese exclusive G1 toys. And it was really easy to get all the Japanese exclusive Beast Wars toys because they were like at Toys R Us, like that. There was no challenge to that, and they had really excellent distribution. Like they'd have a flyer come out and say, September 1st, all the toys will be out. And then you'd go to Toys R Us on September 1st and all the toys would be out. But I got all the old toys on Yahoo Auctions Japan, and for ridiculously low prices. I got Grand Maximus not at an auction but at a comic shop for like sticker price, like retail sticker price, and that was already a 10-year-old toy at the time. So like that was just a fun find. But in terms of the sort of the ephemera, the informational type stuff, and again, this reflects sort of the changing landscape with the internet and Transformers popularity. I was really into the anime intros and outros, the music that would open and close the different Transformers seasons and shows from over the years. And the stuff that was current, the Beast Wars stuff, I could buy the singles of. That wasn't too hard. But the G1 stuff hadn't come out in single form. And if you wanted them, you really had to go to various like used music shops and find the old anime compilation CDs that would have 30 songs from 15 different animes that had come out over the year. And if you were lucky, there'd be two, and if you're unlucky, there'd be like one Transformers show. So it would be the opening and the closing inevitably. So I looked really hard until I found all of and the information was so hard to find. It was so sparse, and it was in Japanese, which I spoke a bit of and I read less of. So I'd be trying to, and I could recognize Transformers. Yeah, I could recognize Headmasters or Master Force. So I'd be like, oh wait, that's it, that's the one I'm after, and I'd be asking in somewhat broken Japanese at the music stops if they had, do you have Anime Super Robot Collection 6? And then let's check, and I wound up getting all of those, and I had a CD burner. I was at a school, and the school had a CD burner, and I think CDs were about $2 each or something, something relatively like affordable, much more expensive than they would be today, but nothing that was going to break the bank. And I wound up making about 15 custom versions of full quality CD rips. I mean, this is like MP3s barely existed at the time. I'm not an expert. I don't remember the timeline. They might have existed. If they did, they didn't exist in ways that were accessible to me. So I wound up just making full CD burns of the music of all the Transformers intros and outros from the G1 show all the way through Transformers Zone, and then selling them at cost, so like $7 or so. And I printed out my own little cover for it at different. I guess it would have been like BotCon 2000 or BotCon 2001 or OTFCC in Chicago. So I was selling and whenever I ran out, I would make another batch of like 10. So I was just, and I felt like I was doing God's work. I felt like, oh man, if I don't share this stuff is just going to get lost to the ages. And then of course, it's all out on MP3 now. You can buy licensed official compilations. There's 4 or 5 different ones, and they're all excellent, and they have great artwork. And I'm glad that sort of those efforts aren't needed because it gets to a much wider audience. But at the time, I don't think there was any sense that Transformers, anime music from the 80s would ever, like, it felt like if I didn't do it, maybe nobody would. So, it's in one sense, in retrospect, it feels a bit like a wasted effort. On the other hand, as you said, it's that thrill of the hunt. It's funny. Like none of those CDs were expensive. They like I wasn't paying $200 for one of those. I mean, it would be probably less than retail because it was like a used CD that wasn't very interesting to anybody. But um, but it was very satisfying to find them all. And I did have people, kind of come up to me later and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you got that." I listened to the Transformers Zone intro like over and over and over again. I'm like, yeah, it's a really catchy tune, you know.
That's so good though, and like you say, and that's something I want to kind of touch on a bit as well. But you don't know it's going to become a relic, if you like, and really hard to track down. And you will find someone somewhere that likes that one particular song or one particular show from however many years ago. It's got to be worth it. It has to be worth it. But one question I really want to go into then is, given what's been dropped yesterday as of recording with Studio Trigger, how, from your eyes, from your perspective, how do you know that it's going to end up an archivist hunt later on? That we got 40 years worth of material out there to choose from and dig. Not everything's going to be really hard to come by and really hard to go digging for and sought after. But you think Earthspark, we've had newer shows, but there will be a time 10, 15 years later where maybe yourself or others will be looking for early drafts of an Earthspark script. So I guess, how do you know when to, like, is it only going to be going back as far as G1, or would you go looking for early drafts of newer stuff perhaps?
I tend to follow sort of my passion and my interest. And um, I kind of feel like when there's a Transformers show that I really respond to, that's when I want to kind of, go delving. Like I really enjoyed Transformers animated. So when I had a chance to chat with Derek and Wyatt at one of the BotCons and say, "Hey, I did this ARC book. I'd love to kind of do something like that for animated," they were very interested, and collectively we sort of all made it happen. And I'm really glad that that sort of stuff is archived. On the other hand, like there are the sort of modern archivists, guys like Kian Carlisle, who are sort of even more, like he grew up with animated in the way that I grew up with G1. So like I kind of, in some ways, I kind of went into animated, and I got all the material that was sort of readily accessible at Cartoon Network, and then I put it in a book, and I kind of felt like my work here is done. I've archived the things that really need archiving. I've I've put sort of future pop culture historians and animated fans in a good position where they can read all the stuff that I found, but then I can kind of leave it behind. But Kian is interested in kind of taking it to that next level. So he's kind of the guy who's going and saying, "Oh, is there, I noticed that it said second draft on on the pilot 3 parts. Is there a first draft? Is that something that's accessible?" So he's kind of, I don't want to say pestering, but he's kind of interacting with Marty Eisenberg on that level, and finding it, and I think that's great. I think you're going to have multiple generations of people who are interested in that sort of material, and I'm very happy to help sort of facilitate that. And when a sort of project comes my way, I tend to get very focused on it, very into it. Like Transformers Prime, I did the art book for. They came to me on that one. That wasn't something I pitched, and I hadn't seen that much of Prime. But when they said, "Would you be interested in the art book?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I went and I watched every episode, and I did homework, and I said, "Okay, I think I know what is interesting and what should go into a book." And then after we got the document dump, some of that material was missing, and then I was the one doing the pestering, or hopefully not quite pestering, but doing the earnest pursuit of talking to the art directors and the artists to get those animation models that I felt should be, or whatever, early sketches and whatnot, should be in the book, but hadn't been provided because it wasn't something that whoever was doing the compiling on their end thought was necessary. So I guess that's a long answer to a short question, but I'm going to kind of stay focused on the bits that really excite me and kind of let the people who are really excited by other Transformers projects pursue those up until the point where where I'm involved in an official project, and then at that point, I'm going to go all in. So at least for as long as I'm working on that project, then I'll have that information in the brain. And when people come and say, "Hey, I'm looking for X from Transformers Prime," maybe I have it in my archives, or maybe I at least know who might.
And that's as fair as you can be, isn't it? Because you've said yourself that there's a network of other archivists out there who will have their own passions, and when generations are growing up, of 40 years of it, there's eras of Transformers that people will grow up in and possibly take a bit more of a lead on it. That's good because collecting such as yourselves and for what you found, I think has inspired a lot of other people to do the same, which leads to some of the BotCons, the TFNation, and the big reveals at these grand events. So that's really cool to see. So Jim, we spoke at TFNation, you and I, where I was the one doing the pestering. Actually, I was chewing your ear off around one of my favorite shows of Farscape, and I remember you
Oh
saying to
gosh,
me,
yeah, that was a fun time.
it was talking around the actual accessories that were being used on the show that you were able to procure through auctions. Did I
It
remember?
wasn't an auction actually. That was at
Was
it was just at a comic shop in Los Angeles. And Bill Forster got me a screen used prop of John Crichton, the main character's gun, which he calls Winona, and the holster. And the gun is really neat, but in some ways the holster is almost more impressive because it's an actual piece of clothing or clothing accessory that you can and I have wear. I have worn. And it holds the gun really nicely. It's one of the ones used for the far shots, not the close up, so it doesn't have a working trigger or anything. So you have to use your imagination a bit, acting. But it's fun, and I have a Farscape. I have John Crichton's coat and vest. So you combine that with a pair of black leather pants and a t-shirt, and I've pretty much got the whole Crichton cosplay going on. And certainly the holster would probably be one of the hardest parts to make, and not one I've seen online. And I'd have to learn leather working. And I mean, who has time for that?
I mean, it's a very late 90s, early 2000s time of leather clothing in sci-fi was very much a rage, going into Matrix as well in the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, the Matrix was definitely an inspiration. I mean, clearly they were certainly leaning into the BDSM aesthetic. I mean, the main villain is a bondage monster,
Oh
and
God.
it is awesome. If you haven't watched Farscape, watch Farscape. It's one of the
Yeah.
best televised space operas that you're going to watch. I count it with Farscape, the Battlestar Galactica reboot, and Babylon 5. All that sort of 90s to about roughly a decades of sci-fi on TV and very ambitious storytelling. All of them exploring really interesting themes. To my mind, Babylon 5 has the best plot. Farscape has the best characters, and Galactica has the best exploration of themes. So
I remember seeing your vignettes as I said to you at TFN just gone, when you were all dressed up. You were doing different costumes each time, and then I saw all of the equipment, and then you and I spoke at TFNation in August, where you were telling me about all of these things you procured, and I turned absolutely green with jealousy with the things that you. And I thought you said that you got that at an auction, but you just found it at a comics shop.
yeah. I mean, in Los Angeles, especially, you wind up going. I've gotten plenty of stuff at auctions, but that particular accessory, I remember seeing in the case and saying, "Oh my God, that is such a cool piece." And it wasn't even that expensive. I want to say
Wow.
like on order of maybe $200 ish. And maybe it was three, maybe it was 175 or something, but somewhere in that, somewhere where it wasn't like ridiculous that it was a very generous and big present that thrilled me. Um, but like it wasn't something absurd.
No,
It was less than four figures, by a lot.
yeah, no, that's I'm turning green with jealousy again as you're making me remember all of it. So, but that's so cool. The stuff you can find that in the most random of places. But going back to the books and everything, I mean, are there any particular books that you, looking at your catalog of the arcs and the animated stuff as well, is there any other books that you particularly wish you worked on, or something you would like to work on where your passion goes
So
next?
I really loved the art from um, Titan's Return and Power of the Primes, and now I'm blanking on it. The first one in that the Combiner Wars. I thought that trilogy of artwork was super strong, and I have most of the art, and I would love to see that in a book. It's a really great and very specific aesthetic that and then the Siege, yeah, has, and I don't have all the art from that. I have a bit of art from that, but then the next trilogy of toy releases was also pretty strong and could be a strong book. But I especially thought that had quite a lot of material and quite interesting and visually coherent material. It all sort of works really well together, and it covers a wide range of it covers all the classic characters. One of the nice things about the idea of doing books based on the toy lines is, these days, if they're doing a toy line, you can reliably expect there will be, you know, at least an Optimus, probably several, at least a Megatron, at least a
Yeah,
Starscream, probably a Shockwave and a Grim. Like all the biggies are going to be in there. But then you're also going to get a nice range of, some of the much more obscure guys. And, the scope of the work is so well defined. The toy line has a very definite beginning, middle, end, and that I think would be a really nice visual experience for people to go through, and it helps preserve the art. You were talking not that long ago about, do I wish I could go in and get all the Earth Spark stuff? And on some level, yeah, like I think that would be a fantastic book. I didn't I haven't gone ahead and pitched that to anyone, partially because IDW doesn't have the license anymore, and Viz, who I work with on the visual history, is pretty they do very few high quality books, like super well produced books. IDW had a philosophy of doing, yeah, and IDW books were great, but they tended to do sort of a lot of smaller books that that just didn't require as many resources in terms of editorial, in terms of licensing, from Hasbro's perspective. So like that worked really well with my style, but they don't have the license anymore. So I haven't been pitching some of these ideas to Viz. I've pitched ideas to Viz that I think would be in their wheelhouse. This one is Earthspark is kind of one of the ones that maybe wouldn't be as interesting to them. Whereas, I thought the what's the name of the overarching group of those toy lines of Combiner Wars through Power of the Primes? They called it the Prime
it's
Wars
totally.
trilogy. Like that was something I thought Viz might be interested in, and they definitely considered it. But there's a lot of considerations on the publisher's part, in terms of how much resources they have and what their um, production schedules look like and their launch windows and whatnot. Um, but when you don't do a book when the show or toy line is contemporary, finding the material starts to get exponentially harder over time.
Mm,
Doing Prime Wars, the art of Prime was easy because I had access to an existing studio that was full of people. And even if it wasn't their main job, they could usually find, an hour here or there to go into their hard drives and get me material. But when that material isn't when that material isn't immediately accessible anymore, yeah, it does become harder to do. So doing it earlier is always easier and sort of preferable to doing it later. But on the other hand, I am only one man. I'm probably not going to be doing a book for every single Transformers series that comes out. So
well, that more or less goes into my next point, because you mentioned about sort of the community and the people over in the UK as well that you've worked with. all these things that you find, and going back to your days in Japan, it must get out in a fandom because if not you, who else is going to do it? I think that is absolutely the right trait. So where can people find, other than your books, of course, but where can people find some of these lost relics of archive stuff? Where does it end up for the general public to access?
Well, the easiest place to find it is the easiest place to start certainly is the people who made it. And for stuff like Earthspark and Transformers Prime and I was going to say Transformers Animated, but that's actually going to illustrate my point. Most of the people who created that are still with us. With Transformers Animated, sort of famously, Derek Wyatt passed really young, and that's a tragedy on any number of levels. And I don't want to diminish that at all. But on some level, I'm really glad that I was able to spend, 4 or 5 years, like kind of working closely with him to archive a lot of his final drawings, his sketches and whatnot. And other people have his sketchbooks and whatnot. So like his work, his body of work is fairly well archived. With G1, it's a lot harder. A lot more of those people aren't with us anymore, or they were with us for a while. Like Wally Burr, I got to go to his house and hear him tell stories about World War II, which was amazing. But he's not with us anymore. So the work that's been done to kind of get some of that on paper, get some of that on video, I'm glad it's been done. So people who, if you're a huge Earthspark fan, talk to people like Nick and Nicole and people who worked on the show and say, hey, I love this material. What can I do? Pitch the book. Talk to the creators. See if they're willing to share. Sometimes they're not contractually able to. Sometimes they're just very busy. But sometimes they are. Sometimes the stars align and they are able to get you material. And you can pitch an Earthspark book, and you can find the right publisher, and you can find that right moment, because there's so many things that go into getting a book out. You have to have the skills to actually do it. You have to have a publisher who has the time and the interest and the license. It has to work with Hasbro's strategy. Sometimes Hasbro is primarily a toy company, so they have to always put the toy line first. So if they feel like an Earthspark book in some ways would detract from their current toy line or marketing strategy, it's not going to come out. And that's totally reasonable. That's not a criticism in any way, shape, or form, but it is a reality that you have to deal with. But sometimes, you have something like, oh, it's the Transformers 40th anniversary. That's not, and it'll be the 50th anniversary before you know it. It's going to be a blink and 10 years are going to be gone by, and it's going to be 2034. And if it's, 2032, somebody out there is going to be pitching a 50th anniversary book, and that'll be a good time to revisit some old properties. So, thinking about, oh, hey, it's an anniversary. And Transformers has had so many shows, so many toy lines. And if you're counting by fives, it's always going to be several Transformers anniversaries, right? It's always going to be the 10th year anniversary of G2 and the 5th year, like that's just how time works. So, you kind of, do that, and you never know when Hasbro is going to be doing like a G2 toy line. Like that caught a lot of us, I think, as a pleasant surprise. But if somebody had been pitching a G2 book, about 18 months before that toy line came out, Hasbro might have sort of unexpectedly been like, oh, yes, that would be a great product to get on shelves right around this time. So you don't know. So don't take the rejections too personally, because it probably doesn't have so much to do with you as a whole variety of factors that are really hard to predict. Which is a very, very long answer, probably to several questions. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of books I'd like to work on, but that was the one, the Prime Wars trilogy. That was the one that I thought, it's so pretty. It would be so easy to do, because I do have the material. I think it would sell really well. The one I'd like to do that I don't think would sell really well, don't tell my publisher that, is I'd love to do a GoBots art book. So at some point I might try and do it as a Kickstarter or something. But I know the market's not huge, but I don't think it's zero. And that's very much well, if not me, who? If I don't do the art, the GoBots book, who's going to
Who
do
will?
that one?
Well, yeah, but like we're saying about your time in Japan, there will be one person somewhere who will love that, and that chances are that person's going to tell it to another person, and all of a sudden there's a group of people who want that kind of stuff. So that's you never know, and as you rightly say, do not take the rejection as an answer. So yeah, best of luck to you on that one if that does get off the ground. Okay, so just to finish up then, thank you very much for your time, Jim.
You're
What are
welcome.
you currently working on, and what future appearances have you got planned? Any conventions coming up for Transformers or others?
Sure. I've been doing a lot of work with Renegade Studios. So some of my work showed up as the lore for the Combiner Wars supplement that had come out, and we
Yep,
put
yep.
a lot of deep cuts in there. I'll tell you the story in brief on that. My editor, I had done some work on previous projects with them that was very technical, and then they said for Combiner Wars they wanted to do more with me because I was on time and hit my deadlines and whatnot. Good work, didn't need a lot of re-editing, and they said they wanted me to do the lore, and I said, oh, okay, I can definitely do that. How do you want, what are the parameters, and they said, well, we don't mind, you're kind of known for your deep cuts. We don't mind if you want to do that. I said, really? Okay, because I kind of thought maybe they were going to want to play it kind of safe. And I wouldn't have been at all surprised or annoyed or anything if they had said, "Oh, well, for Combiner Wars, let's try and stick to things that are like always true across all continuities." Which is a note I could have worked with. But instead, they're like, "No, do deep cuts, do guys that combine like one time in that one
Yeah.
episode." I said, "Okay, I can totally do that." So I put a lot of deep cuts in, and definitely people noticed and responded to that. And I've done another supplement with them. I don't know if they've announced it, so I don't know if I can say what it is, but I'm definitely doing like a similar book to Combiner Wars, where I did all the lore for it, and also so this time I got to design some of the perks and some of the gear that your characters can use, and then after I had finished with that, they came back and they said, we'd like to hire you to do an edit pass. And I said, oh, I mean, I can, like, I'm not going to lie. It's not like, my spelling is the best. And they said, no, we want you to do a lore edit pass. And I said, oh, and they said, yeah, just go through and make sure like nothing is wrong. It's fine if something is new, and they had some new stuff, like they had a new character, and I said, "Oh, that's a cool idea. I like that. You're sort of a power up of an existing character." And I said, "Oh yeah, no, I dig that." But just when they're sort of making factual statements, make sure they're right. And I was like, okay, I could do that. And I wasn't sure how much I would find, because but I think this might have been motivated by something, specific. Maybe in a previous book, someone said, oh, they called this character X and it's Y. I don't know the specifics. But I kind of went through and I looked at all the captions and I looked at, I read the whole book twice, and sure enough, I did find some things, but maybe the thing that I found first that I felt like, okay, I've just justified my entire salary was I read the back copy of the book, and like because it came in three PDFs, like the first half of the book, the second half of the book, and then the cover, which was the front and the back and the spine. And I'm reading the back cover, and they got the name of the book wrong. They called it a different book. It was a cut and paste error, but I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I've justified my salary. Like that
You found,
alone.
you
I
found
felt
something
I felt
key.
pretty good
Yeah.
about. I felt pretty good about that. So I've been
Excellent.
doing work with them, and it's a lot of fun. I've been a D&D player my whole life. Since I was about 7 or 8 years old. I got to meet Gary Gygax when I was a little kiddo. Speaking
Wow.
of the people that weren't with us, I was very nervous, but he was super cool. Um, but I like the role playing tabletop role playing games. I like Transformers, so that intersection I thought was kind of cool. And
Awesome.
upcoming convention appearances. I'm going to be at the Burbank TFCon in March. So if you're in the area, or even if you're not in the area, it's a con worth traveling for. It's, I'm pretty sure it's the biggest Transformers convention in the world. They have huge attending numbers. They have a huge number of guests. Like they have so many guests that they have to rotate out the tables because, like, they have about twice as many guests as they have, or maybe three times as many guests as they have room for. I remember once going to a signing and like Vince DiCola was in my seat. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I got to chat with him for a few minutes. I bought every one of his CDs that he had. I said, okay, I want one of each, because I hadn't seen him in a while. It felt like it had been a while. I saw him at BotCon '97, and he gave just a kick-ass concert. But like so much has changed, in the intervening 27 years.
No, it's really interesting to see, and I hope it won't be too long before you see you back over in the UK at maybe a
Well,
TFNation.
I haven't been announced or anything, but I mean, I haven't missed a TFNation since inception. So,
Wow.
I imagine, if you're in the UK, you'll have a chance to see me there. And I had a lot of fun doing the Toronto show. So if they're interested, there's a pretty good chance I'll be doing that one again next July or so. It always falls right on my birthday. So
Oh,
so
excellent.
we
Well,
made it we made a family trip out of it this year. My folks met me, my wife and kid came, and they did the tourist stuff, I did the con stuff, and then afterwards, the Monday after the con was my actual birthday, so we went out and celebrated together. It was a good time.
there's worse things to do on your birthday than that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming along. Do follow Jim on all forms of social media and do go and say hello to him at the conventions. He's great to talk to.
Do
Take
I'm
it from
super
me.
friendly. I love chatting with people. The main reason I do this is just so I can interact and have the geek out conversations about Transformers or GoBots or Farscape or Babylon 5 or Star Trek or Star Wars or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I've worked on. I love all this stuff. I think this
Yeah.
is, I got the Mystery Machine behind me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love this culture and fandoms, and it's such a joy to me.
And headlock photos also included, if you ask nicely.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'll do funny. I'll do a lot of finger guns. Bang, 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 bang.
Thanks very much for watching. And as always, I will see you on the next one.